Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming out on this chilly day we have. I want to first thank so much the Howe folks for helping us host this. This has absolutely been incredible. We have a ridiculously amazing location here, which is a hybrid with cameras everywhere. We have some folks online that are going to be supporting us digitally with their reading. And I'd like to just start with introducing what Clamantis is for some folks that may be unfamiliar. Clamantis, the MALS Journal, is a biannual publication of the Masters of Arts in Liberal Studies program at Dartmouth. The journal aims to showcase the strongest pieces of creative and critical writing submitted by MALS students, MALS alumni, and Guarini graduate students. By selecting and integrating work from all four concentrations at MALS and from the broader Guarini community, we endeavor to promote intellectual engagement, fruitful questioning, and honest discourse within the realm of liberal studies. The breakdown for this evening is we have about 8 readers, and if anybody else by the end has anything that they'd like to share, please feel free to come on up and read what you might have. Our first reader is Maria Iriondo. Maria is a second-year MALS student with a concentration in creative writing. She holds a BS in print journalism from Florida International University and an MLit from the University of Glasgow. Maria works as the managing editor of Yachting Times magazine, a bilingual English and Spanish yachting and lifestyle publication, and as a freelance podcast and television producer. As a creative writer, Maria is mostly interested in historical fiction. Maria?
So I'm going to read Creamed Cod. Okay. Growing up with a Portuguese mother sometimes proved to be a challenge. Like most kids, I hated fish. The pungent smell, the slimy texture, the tiny bones, but few love fish, especially cod, more than the Portuguese. We can cook bacalhau in 101 ways, Mother boasted. Nobody makes it like we do. Portugal's love affair with cod dates back to the 15th century, when Portuguese explorers got lost on their way to India and ended up in Terra Nova, an island off the coast of Canada where cod is plentiful. In our home, cod was baked, fried, smothered in onions, and turned into croquettes. And of course, Mother made me eat every last bit of it. Stinky cod was what I called it, every time I caught a whiff of its briny scent in our kitchen. Butterfly cuttings of salted cod hung from a window like weathered wooden planks waiting to be soaked and continually rinsed for 2 days before getting tossed into a simmering pot of hot water for 5 minutes to be later skinned and shredded into feathery bits. Mother's favorite dish was creamed cod. She started with the bechamel sauce by melting butter on the stove, stirring in some flour with a wooden spoon, and cooking it until it released a nutty scent. Then she added some milk with a sprinkle of nutmeg and continued stirring without pause until the mixture thickened and was finished with some heavy cream, salt, and pepper. Thinly sliced onions were sautéed with crushed garlic, and potatoes were cut into small cubes and fried. All was then combined in a clay pot and topped with a mixture of grated Parmesan cheese and breadcrumbs dotted with butter and baked until golden brown. Creamed cod was served for Christmas dinner, birthdays, and any other celebration Mother saw fit, and of course, on many Fridays during Lent. As I got older, I avoided cod at all costs. No matter how fancy it looked on a restaurant menu, disguised under alluring appetizers with French names like brandade, which is salted cod mixed with a puree of olive oil and milk, or sophisticated Italian main courses like bacala alla Luarnese, cod loin covered in crushed tomatoes, capers, and olives, I'd immediately shift my gaze away to the meat options. When I got pregnant with my daughter Emma, I started having cravings right away. No, not for cod. That would have been interesting. I craved tomatoes, something I had never cared for except for ketchup on my French fries. Gladly, I was living in Providence, Rhode Island at the time, a town bustling with Italian restaurants that helped satisfy my incessant urge to devour all variations of tomato sauce. Marinara, bolognese, arrabbiata, to name a few. I also bought kilos of tomatoes, poached them to make Mexican salsa, roasted them to make soup, ate them whole with a sprinkle of salt, and even made them into marmalade. As soon as my mother found out I was pregnant, she made arrangements to visit. Sadly, she passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack 2 days before her flight from Lisbon to Providence. Heartbroken, I spent my days curled up in bed trying to make sense of it all. Here I was having to say goodbye to my mother, yet having to muster the enthusiasm to decorate a baby's room and buy onesies to welcome my daughter. Moments after Emma was born, she opened her eyes, and immediately I saw mother's perky spirit in them. Later that night, after Emma was taken back to the hospital nursery and my husband had gone home to feed the dogs, I fell asleep for a couple of hours, and upon waking, I saw a nurse walk into the room holding a tray with food. She placed the tray on the overbed table and swiveled it towards me. I sat up and lifted the metal cover, finding a mound of something white covered in golden breadcrumbs that released a familiar scent. Baked scrod, said the nurse. Scrod is baby cod. Famished, I pierced my fork into the crumbly mixture and without hesitation took a bite. The crunchy, buttery crust, the thick, silky white sauce, and the tender, flaky fish tickled my taste buds with the memories of my childhood. I found myself taking slow bites, savoring every bit of the hospital's version of creamed cod, wrapping myself in the warmth of what felt like a thick, fuzzy blanket, feeling Mother's presence right there with me. My war against cod was over. Thereafter, the once loathed fish turned into a meaningful staple at my household, so much so that I became known as the Queen of Cod. Queen of Cod amongst my closest friends, when, as per their request, I made creamed cod the main meal at every dinner party. It has also turned out to be Emma's favorite dish. Surely she got much more than my mother's perky brown eyes.
Thank you, Maria. Next, we have via Zoom, Chandlee Bryan.
She is no longer in the Zoom meeting.
Okay, we will swap around a few folks in that case. Loey, are you comfortable starting? Wonderful. Okay. So Loey Crooks has a BA in French from Holland University. She started writing when she was 9. Adolescence shook her confidence, and writing was put on the back burner until she discovered the world of fan fiction as a young college student. Eventually, she branched out into original fiction and found her voice in telling queer young adult stories. She also loves creative nonfiction and making sense of the world through her own lived experiences. Loey works at Dartmouth's Baker-Berry Library, supervising students and plotting all of the queer novels she hopes to one day actually write. When she's not daydreaming or wandering the stacks, she spends her time crocheting, playing with her niece, and saying hi to dogs. Everybody, Loey Crooks.
This is a nonfiction essay called My Blue Heaven. I have a fragmented memory of my grandfather. Imposing at nearly 6.5 feet, thin and lanky, Papa loomed over me, the friendliest of giants, in his tennis whites or tweed trousers, loafers or sneakers as big as boats on his long, narrow feet. He smelled of tobacco from the pipe he smoked in the evening, a tumbler of scotch within reach. I liked to watch him shave. It was so different from the way my dad did it, carefully maintaining his thick mustache every morning with intentional precision. Instead of a big razor and Barbasol shaving cream, Pop-Up made an art out of the mundanity of keeping his face free of whiskers. The pedestal sink in the master bathroom allowed room only for him. The ceiling slope and he had to stand in a specific spot to keep from hitting his head. He let me hover beside him, tucked between the edge of the sink and the window that looked out over the side of the house and the metal box where milk was still delivered each morning. I watched as if he were creating magic, performing a feat of wonder and awe, and not simply a benign act of personal grooming. He talked to me as he went about his routine, a ritual I found fascinating, as he dipped the thick brush into the pot of white soap, working it to a lather. A curious child who'd been called bossy, nosy, and all the now outdated coded antonyms for weak and pliable, I asked question after question. "What does that do, Pop-Up?" I asked, gesturing to the brush as he applied the foam to his jaw, careful to get his upper lip in the dip beneath his mouth. "Why do you use that thing?" I asked the same question, each time he pulled a straight razor from its place, hidden in the mirrored cabinet on the wall. Daddy preferred the kind of inexpensive plastic razor you could buy at the drugstore, a pack of 5 or 10 for a few dollars. I was intimidated by Pop-Up in the way all children are by their grandparents, but I loved going to visit him. He was kind to me, gentle. My other grandfather was 10 years older than Pop-Up and bore the demeanor of someone deeply resentful of what their life had become. Pop-Up sang songs with delightful, happy lyrics and old ballads from the 40s and 50s that make my granny's eyes wet when I pull them up on YouTube. He had a lovely voice, a rich baritone that comforted me to sleep. He played the mandolin and had a laugh that made you want to be the reason for that musical sound, filling the living room or kitchen. This contrast between my grandfathers, two men at opposite ends of a generation having lived such different lives, is what has stayed with me long after their deaths. Pop-Up moved through the world, through my life, as though he enjoyed it. From what I understood, he loved his work, his daughters, and his wife, and he was overjoyed when I, his first grandchild, was born. He always seemed happy to see me and my siblings and cousins, as though grandparenthood suited him. I knew him as Pop-Up. His full name was Charles Newton Skank. He was Mr. Skank to neighbors and some of his newer clients at the law firm. He was Newt to friends and colleagues, Nudie to his brother and sister, and dear to my granny. I was 20 when he died. I couldn't attend his funeral because I was studying in Paris. I grieved more for my mother, worried that her tenuous sobriety would fall apart with the death of her father. My own father's death when I was 11, the grief and the pain and the trauma and how they'd affect my mom hit me more concretely than the loss of my grandfather. In the years since his death, my Pop-Up has achieved mythological status in both my heart and my memory, a fairy tale hero with a heart of gold whom everyone adored. At 41, I regret that I knew him only as a granddaughter knows a grandfather, raised at the opposite end of the country in a period so foreign to the one in which his generation was brought up. As a child and teenager, I knew the barest truth about his time as an officer with the United States Army, a story that sounded cool because I was too young and naive to understand the weight of the reality and the echoes of it through not only his life, but the lives of his wife and daughters. Having experienced my own kind of trauma, I am interested in the trauma of others and the kind of people they become in the aftermath. I have witnessed the way one traumatic event reverberates and impacts those who experienced it in wildly different ways. My grandfather's story is one of millions of stories from the Second World War, a story that could be told by someone else's granddaughter or grandson. His experience informed the life he chose to live, raising a family while leading in service to his city. I am interested in Pop-Up's experiences because I don't understand. Maybe I'll never understand the kind of strength it takes to survive and turns one life into a legacy. I wish I could know him now. I have so many questions for him. He was 19 when he went to Europe, a handsome, fresh-faced son of New Jersey parents with a brand new degree from Yale and the title of officer, in charge of a unit of men sent to fight a foreign enemy. How many countless millennials and Gen Xers share this same history of grandparents coming home from war with battered bodies and altered minds? Pop-Up didn't talk about the war. I grew up knowing, though I don't remember being told, that I was never to ask him about it. Everything I know comes from other people. I used to wake up and hear him shouting in his sleep, Mom told me once. I was 16, and I had asked her because we were learning about the war in history class. I wanted to know everything and couldn't call him up and ask him, as if it were my right to know the terror that revisited him in his sleep so many decades later. The Battle of the Bulge was just a spot on a map, glossed over in school because there was too much to learn. But I wanted to know the details. But why won't he talk about it? I asked her, with the same teenage attitude and entitlement I used to insist she let me pierce my nose. She said no. I am embarrassed by those memories. I understand now. There are things we live through, things we survive, that we put away so we can get up and continue to live. To imagine begging my grandfather to relive his trauma, to hash it out for the sake of an impertinent granddaughter, is shameful to me. As a child, I treated his experience like an adventure, a sensational story, rather than an incomprehensible horror that he'd survived by the grace of something. What I know, I have learned from listening. Granny shares bits and pieces in response to questions and in an effort to keep her memories of him sharp in her mind. He was her great love, and when she talks about him, it's like watching her step back in time. Her gaze goes to some spot across the room, but she is 20, 30, 60 years in the past. Wasn't he so handsome, she asks, when she catches me staring at the sepia portrait of him in his uniform. It's been displayed in the same prominent space beside where Granny sits to watch television or knit for longer than I have been alive. They met in Paris in 1952 when Granny was a recent graduate of Holland's College. An unmarried woman, society dictated she return to her parents' house. She joined her mother and youngest siblings on Staten Island, and by July, they were living as the family of an American diplomat in Paris. I have memorized the story of how my great-grandmother, intent on marrying her oldest daughter to a lawyer, arranged for Newt to sit beside her one evening when many of my great-grandfathers, my opa's colleagues, joined them for dinner to celebrate the coming end of the Marshall Plan and their looming return to the States. Pop-Up was handsome. Even in the colorless photo, I can see how pale and alive his eyes are. I remember how tall he was, towering over everyone. Shoulders back in that military posture imposed upon him as a teenager. In the shape of his mouth, I see my mom. He has the same eyes as my sister Sarah and looks like an older, more masculine image of his youngest, my Aunt Carrie. Can you believe it, Lois Ann? Granny asks me. Her eyes are unfocused, her hands clasped in her lap. She is reverent, her voice hushed as if we are in church. His entire unit was destroyed. He was captured by the Germans. Granny talks so rarely about Pop-Up that I put my book or my crochet project away and listen with my entire body. I hang on to every word she says. I have a million questions that start with how and why, and none of them have an answer. His mother saved every letter he sent her, and that's how she knew something was wrong. The letters stopped coming. Granny's voice changes. Isn't it quite a miracle? That winter was brutally cold. Pop-Up was captured by the Germans 3 weeks before his 22nd birthday. He survived for 3 months in a prison camp. The effects of those months of pneumonia, hypothermia, and malnutrition followed him through the rest of his life. I struggle to believe in God or gods or a higher power, but I believe in the miracle that is the life of my grandfather. Pop-Up died a month after his 79th birthday from the aftershocks of his time in Germany. Do you know, Granny continues, and I say nothing because I don't know, and I want to know everything. He was nursed through pneumonia by a Serbian doctor. He had been in the camp longer than your grandfather. What happened to him, I blurt out, like I am still a child at my granny's knee. Granny comes back to herself. She shrugs a shoulder. Oh, I'm sure he was executed. Her tone is matter of fact. Granny accepts the sadness and grief of life the same way she accepts property taxes and the weather. I wonder if it occurs to her that this Serbian prisoner, had he lived, could have been someone's Pop-Up. And that is what changes everything. New was my grandfather, a real person I only remember in bits and pieces, who left behind a legacy I feel a need to uncover. I am compelled to explore the pieces of history that make up my grandfather's life, the what-ifs that pile up, one on top of the next, the kindness of a fellow prisoner, the patriotism of a German farmer. His story is a web, a puzzle, a map of a life beginning in Englewood, New Jersey, and ending in New Haven by way of Yale, Hammelburg, and Paris. I'm after the pins on the map between Yale and Hammelburg, after he was rushed through college into the rank of an officer, when he was packed off to training camp and then shipped overseas. I'm in search of the trail that led him to Oflog 13B and how he made it home again. Newt's story does not belong to me, but I cannot shake the sense of urgency to tell it, to untangle the threads that led him from the Ardennes to New Haven, where he lived, after surviving, where I sat on his knee and begged him to sing me My Blue Heaven or Skidamarink and pulled silly faces to make him laugh. I have too many questions and no sense of how or where to begin. What I do have is a memory. Soap on the tip of my nose as Pop-Up grinned at me, with a twinkle in his eye, and let me watch him shave. I'll start there.
Thank you so much, Loey. Next, we have Chennelle Chancer. Chennelle is a graduate student at Dartmouth College in the Master's of Arts in Liberal Studies program with a concentration in creative writing. She received a bachelor's degree in English creative writing from Binghamton University in 2019. She's interested in written work around themes such as immigration, Black identity, Black familial structures, language, and womanhood. She's a first-generation immigrant from Jamaica and the eldest of three. Everyone, Chennelle?
Hello. This is my first ever poetry reading, so I'm a little bit nervous. I'm going to start with the two pieces that are published in Clamantis. First one being All My Colors. Oh, sorry. All my colors. Black. Black like warm, like teeth on black skin, like how many takes it took God to make you. Perfect shade of blue in your veins. We are of same blood, and do bleed often inside. Tired body with yellow walls and red eyes still waits for me to say love and kiss with lips that paint well. You are all my colors. The next poem is called Ghetto Magic. Corner's fine, he's magic, whispers dirty steps. Ghetto hymns, clean silence, count quick hand tricks. Wait, wait, wait. Cars come humming questions, suddenly gone, subtle nods, eyes up the sleeve, slight work, siblings class rail for balance, tumbling down steps, won't ask him about currency. Adjust church clothes for magic shows. Church is perfection. Mom tucks kids in bed, dad says wait. The magician needs time. Asks about prayer. My next two poems are going to be published in the 2023 edition of Bloodroot Lit, which I'm very excited about. The first one is entitled The Woman's Tongue Tree. It was a celebration, really. He tore my dress. There were flowers, yellow, greenish white, pressed pistols smelling up the back seat. A message on the windshield to fly home. It was a celebration. There is an image of me baring my teeth, a mother praying me off the island, white mattering. I kept my eyes open through it all. It was a tradition. Every cell awake and stinging. He fed me noisy fruit. I poisoned it twice for love. It was a summer I was leafless. The next poem is For Girls with Paper Wings. There is a ladder in the kitchen to the top of my sky, a bricked roof room overlooking a cracked sidewalk, an aging wrought iron gate. I don't have the legs to jump, a bed of tansies that will complain if my timing's off. I'd like to think they'd leave me there, stretching, until I feel it in my toes, until the traffic subsides, until she turns the corner to trace my outline. Maybe if I was made in the shape of you, I could climb the cumulus clouds home. With no key, I doubt these wings would carry me. This next poem is one of my favorites, and I recently got to read it to my dad for his birthday. It's called My Big Daughter. Sometimes I cry into the rough of my sleeve over a bowl of soup I told you I made well. I burnt the bottom window watching. I have a view now, you know. better than anything I could send you pictures of. But you still ask to see the grass around my porch, to tell me it's not kept well, and in March you will trim it. Your new job pays you 30 cents a minute to be a fixture. An improvement, yes, this boss has all his teeth. The hallways are wider, the chairs easier on your back, a celebration of your name behind every door, faces that make you feel like you swallowed the sun. When did I hand this task off? Sunday, after the final freight train trundles by, you light up the box I store you in when my mind is full. We fumble through a few faceless questions, and then you ask me if I have forgotten you. You, the reason I am sure heavens exist. And this last poem is kind of a rough draft, so I'm just reading it to see how it goes. It's called Talking with My Hands. These ain't gang signs. For Amias, Kershnik, Rakim Hashim, et al. Saturday, I tie your laces up, throw them over my shoulder for safe passage, toss them high till they walk the wire. I know you were here. I'm a pinky finger twister now. I hold your daughter with my good hand. The left one's bulletproof. The left one's tungsten. It's grabbed the skillet without a mitt tuck. I use it to keep her Barbie safe. I use it to make holes every time I hear a car backfire. Sunday, I'm closed fist mad. I hold my hand out anyway. There's construction by the old school. Enough scaffold to hide a misfit or a misstep. I wrote your name in the cement. Palmed the imprint like it knew me. Then surrendered. I'm touching the sky. I'm touching the sky. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew, Chandlee's in the meeting and ready to go next.
Wonderful, thank you. Next we have Chandlee Bryan. Chandlee works at Dartmouth's Geisel School of Medicine, where she focuses on career development for master's students in public health and quantitative biomedical science. She enjoys studying creative writing and the medical humanities in her coursework in the MALS program. Chandlee enjoys researching and writing family history, knitting in collaboration with colleagues on the Dartmouth Chronic Health Improvement Research Team. Chandlee.
Thank you. This is a poem called Our Business is Hard, and it takes the form of a pantoum, which is a format I learned in one of my medical humanities classes. Our business is hard. The medical school surpasses my expectations. Our privileges are good, wrote Robert to his intended. Betsy, our business is hard, but it will not last forever. We are in lecture rooms 5 hours in the day and have to pay the strictest and most intense attention. Our privileges are good, wrote Robert to his intended. Separated from my native hills, from the land that holds everything that is lovely, every one that is dear. We are in lecture rooms 5 hours in the day and have to pay the strictest and most intense attention. Surrounded by strangers, tired with study, and harassed by an unrelenting cold. Separated from my native hills, from the land that holds everything, every that is lovely, every one that is dear. For in such a world as ours, subjected as we are to all the vicissitudes of life, to sickness, sorrow, and death, valuable indeed are the pleasures of friendship. Chilled and frozen must be that heart which cannot feel that the sweetest of earthly joys result from the mutual interchange of soul. For in such a world as ours, subjected as we are to all the vicissitudes of life, to sorrow, to sickness and death, Robert steered his horses to see a sick child in a snowstorm, leaving behind Betsy and her newborn son. Chilled and frozen must be that heart which cannot feel that the sweetest of earthly joys result from the mutual interchange of the soul. Robert treated the child, saying nothing of his newborn son or of his harassment from an unrelenting cold. Robert steered his horses to see a sick child in the snowstorm, leaving behind Betsy and their newborn son. The dates in the family tree preserve the story of my great-grandmother's grandparents. Robert Smith Morrill Jr., born February 21st, 1842. Dr. Robert Morrill Smith Sr. died February 25th, 1842. More than one kind of history repeats itself, wrote Robert and Betsy's granddaughter Ruth. There is pleasure in rejoicing with those who rejoice and weeping with those who weep. I find and gather strength from my ancestors during the COVID-19 pandemic, carrying them with me to my new work in a medical school. Our students take up to 5 courses at a time and have to pay the strictest and most intense attention. Our business is hard, but it will not last forever. So my grandmother's great-grandfather, Robert Smith Morrill, went to Bowdoin Medical School. And this poem transposes phrases in the correspondence between Robert and his future wife, Betsy Eastman. And their separation from the native hills was approximately 146-mile distance from Canterbury, New Hampshire to Hanover. And I just think about all the differences today. These books were preserved in a book called Love Letters of the 1830s, which my grandmother's Aunt Ruth preserved in 1915. And I feel like I used a lot of their own lines, so I don't even feel like the authorship of the poem is completely my own. But thank you very much for allowing me to share.
Our next reader is Alexander Malakoff. Alexander Malakoff graduated with his BFA in creative writing from Emerson College in 2020. Throughout that time, he focused on short fiction dealing primarily with themes of existentialism and realism. He's a current master's student in the MALS department with a focus on creative writing. Alexander Malakoff.
Thank you. I'm going to time myself just to make sure I don't go over. So I'm going to be reading What We Keep. That's on page 74 if you have the journal. And then I'll just kind of go whenever the timer tells me to stop. Dear Mr. James Bryan, I'm a private writing instructor. In my first year of college, I began my employment at Mr. Ames's company on a part-time basis. In addition to the teaching experience, I enjoyed traveling to each student's home where I could understand them more on an individual basis. I continued as a contractor, allowing me the flexibility necessary to complete my graduate degree this past spring. On the morning of October 1st, I received a letter from Mr. Ames informing me of his dissatisfaction with my recent work performance. The purpose of our service is to achieve results for our students. They expect improvements in their writing from your sessions, not merely a list of recommendations for revision. Your lack of initiative over the last few months has led to several parental complaints and demands for reimbursement. Based upon your experience and exceptional performance with us over the past 6 years, I'm willing to provide you with a final opportunity to express your commitment to your future with us. I appreciated your decision to come and work for us full-time after your graduation and would like to consider this a matter of transition. Mr. Gustel has been in association with us for some time, unable to locate the appropriate fit for his daughter, Natalia. I've been told that her material is due this month. She is, by every standard, in need of guidance and would benefit from your tutelage. In addition to the handwritten note or other documents, Mr. Gustel's address in Beacon Hill, Natalia's college personal statement, and the expected meeting time the following day. I'd expected to be briefed on the steady reduction of clients I was being assigned. Mr. Ames's warning, however, caught me by surprise, pacing around my studio apartment in a nervous panic. I reread the letter, considering the chronology of the dates mentioned, and realized what had happened. At the onset of my collegiate career, I received a generous scholarship based on the merit of my creative writing. I'd intended on becoming a professor after completing my schooling, and so took on as many clients as possible. I hoped to present my future employers with as much practical training as I could. At the time, I did not consider anything beyond completing their assignment. They often watched on in silence as I typed up their research paper or book report. I never heard a single complaint from either student or parent, least of all Mr. Ames. This business arrangement continued throughout graduate school. By the time I earned my diploma and received the last of my stipend, I failed to hear back from any of my applications for a professorship and slowly began reevaluating my approach to education, starting with my students. I discovered a sense of meaning in teaching that eluded me throughout my time in school. Instead of filling out their assignments for them, I encouraged them to try their hardest and write their material. Even when they failed, their efforts brought us both a great sense of pride for their having extended themselves beyond what was comfortable. My favorite moments were when they realized their capabilities were substantially more than they had considered. My success had been tethered to theirs. This, I found, began to counteract the isolating nature I developed as an artist. Many of the students were already known by their teachers and parents to struggle in class. Despite my efforts, little was written in these sessions. Several only attended with the expectation that their work would be completed for them and never scheduled a second meeting. However, for those that did return, I felt I was genuinely beginning to make the impact I wished for. These few must not have been enough to satisfy Mr. Ames. Gripping his letter, I searched for any hesitation in the stroke of his words. I hoped with enough time I could determine some alternative solution for reconciliation beyond changing my current methodology. I remember a tightness in my chest and a steady migraine building at the back of my head. I lay on the couch. When rereading the words became too much of a strain, I closed my eyes and repeated Mr. Ames's words aloud. The purpose of our service is to achieve results. They expect improvements. Your lack of initiative, a final opportunity. I listened for any shift in the cadence of his sentences, one unintentional, one telling me that there was some possibility for discussion and explanation, but I only heard my voice growing more desperate each time. Briefly, I opened my eyes to the rest of the documents on the counter at the top of a pile of bills. I shut my eyes and folded the letter, placing it in my pocket. The market was tight, my scholarship had kept me out of debt, but I had little savings. I decided to rest, waiting for the pain in my head to stop. I nodded off and awoke with the lingering fantasy of abandoning my duties and the last remaining part of my dream to teach. It was late evening and my head was still pounding. Neither had I discovered anything of worth in Mr. Ames's words, nor had I attempted to review Natalia's paper. The pink glow of the sun faded from my room. I turned on the light by the door to see the documents still awaiting me, reminding me of their existence. Forcing myself up from between the leather cushions, I made my way into the kitchen. I heated some coffee and opened her stove. Out of self-preservation, I edited her writing repeatedly until the morning. It was the smell of dew through the cracked window and the blue mist rolling over the tar atop neighboring tenements that alerted me to the day. I arrived at the Gustel residence at 4 p.m., having decided that I would do everything in my power to assist Natalia, but I would not forge any material, regardless of the threat to my job. I refused to give up the last remaining element of my original aspiration to be a professor, the satisfaction of seeing a student succeed through constant trials. Teaching is always a matter of meeting the individual where they are and providing guiding questions that inspire them to think for themselves. These are the values I've been reminded of since graduating, ones I carry with me, inspired by those who taught me when I was first learning growing up in Dorchester. Mr. Gustel welcomed me with a brief tour of his red brick townhouse. He wore a light gray pinstripe suit and polished brown monk-strap shoes, which shone beneath the crystal chandelier hanging in the foyer. Motioning toward the drawing room where I'd meet Natalia, he led me up the stairs into his office. The room was small and gleamed with lacquer. My daughter, Mr. Gustel said, leaning against the front of his desk, is particular about her work, and I'm particular about with whom she works. In his light suit, he stood apart from the dark millwork. With his dark green eyes, he looked me over from the lace of my shoes, up the creases of my pants, the folds of my lapels. Between us on the wall hung a singular photo of Mr. Gustel and an especially tall woman whom I took to be his wife. They posed in the stands, dressed in cricket sweaters. Mr. Brooks, he continued, as his eyes raised past my collar and his gaze met mine. Mr. Ames and I have had a long dialogue about what is best for Natalia, and he's assured me that the three of us are in agreement. Yes, I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange in the tight space. The thick carpet and wall of books and the coffered ceiling dampened my voice as if smothering it from identifiability. Comforted by the reality of defying Mr. Ames and Mr. Gustel by abiding my resolution, I felt an indeterminable unease ripple through my body. I paused, fearful of the pull of something beyond me that might sever me from my oath to myself if I spoke much more. Mr. Gustel pushed himself up and walked over to me, standing by the doorway. What did you study at Dartmouth? I had several friends at Tuck. They used to come down to New Jersey for Princeton's finance talks. My master's was in writing and literature, Mr. Gustel. He straightened up, looked me over, took one step over toward his desk and focused on me. Gustel, Mr. Brooks, he enunciated slowly with delight. Do you know where it's from? Is it French? I asked, pulling back my shoulders to mirror his posture. He shook his head. English. It's English, Mr. Gustel, he laughed. Anyway, he said, his face relaxing. I took a creative writing class back in undergrad, writing the other, my professor called it. I learned so much in that course, he said, moving back behind his desk and taking a seat. When I went back to my core lectures, I saw everything differently. The world was no longer dictated by purely by monetary interests, passion, and expression. Everything you do, that's where true meaning comes from. Now, I'm not sure my writing ever improved much, but that lens, that way of looking at things, I feel is the reason I am here today. Why you're here today, and not another one of those jokers, he said, slapping his hand against his desk. After a moment, he pulled out a file from a drawer, tapping the manila folder on his palm. He looked at me. I've written down some notes. Consult them as you like. He handed me the document. What matters most is her voice. She can be quiet with people she's not familiar with. The others, he said, gesturing to me in a vague and personal manner, just wrote something and handed it to me. He stopped, shook his head, and turned away from me. The tall back of his chair concealed the majority of his body. While I waited for him to finish, I glanced up at the library of bespoke case bindings, which by their spines I looked to have never been opened. Eventually, turning around, he said, one cannot sacrifice the authenticity of the author. Mr. Gustel's explanation clarified why Mr. Ames had decided I was the proper instructor to satisfy their particular situation. Mr. Ames's understanding of my refusal to write on behalf of my students in conjunction with Mr. Gustel's desire to retain Natalia's characteristic prose ironically left me with no other approach than the one I had recently maintained, and the one that had resulted in my presence there that day. My daughter is waiting for you downstairs. The deadline for her submission is tomorrow. As he spoke, I discovered the true meaning of Mr. Ames's request and felt the magnitude of my task. The same tightness in my chest returned from the day before. I've come to work. I have some work to complete myself, Mr. Gustel continued, so take your time and get it right. She's worked with tutors most of her life, so she's used to people like you, he said, pausing for a moment. You did review her work, yes? I wanted to speak about the impossibility of his request, but feared my words would betray me again. His green eyes were unmoved and offered me no option of rebuke. I nodded. He leaned back in his chair. What did you think? How did it, I know it needs some revision, but I really feel she's onto something with the camping trip. I felt the urge to navigate Mr. Gustel's inquiry with extreme care. Natalia's paper needed considerable attention, but I did not want to disappoint Mr. Gustel any more than he had already been. I'll be able to help her, I said plainly. Mr. Gustel looked at me in silence. His head turned to the photo hanging between us and then back to me. After some time, I noticed a small rise at the corner of his lips. He waved me off, signaling for me to close the door as I left. I retreated down the steps, reaching the first floor landing. I stood before the sliding mahogany doors and considered reading the notes Mr. Gustel had given me. Opening the top of the manila envelope, I stopped myself and decided to teach the way I thought was best, the way Mr. Ames intended me to. As I slipped the envelope into my bag, I wondered what sort of impact I could have, I could even have with such a limited amount of time. Sinking my hand into my pocket, I felt the edge of Mr. Ames's letter I turned to the front door. Its glass body filled with swirling iron bars reminded me of the local prison I walked by every day after class as a child and considered leaving. It had started to rain. My car sat on the curb, streetlights glimmering off of its windshield. I sighed and opened the heavy door. I hesitated briefly as I entered the drawing room and saw the extraordinary thin frame of Natalia beneath a baggy cricket sweater, sitting at the desk in the corner beside an empty fireplace. She looked up shyly from the scribbles in her notepad. "Hello," I said, taking a seat next to her. "My name is Max." "Hi," she said meekly, looking back at her drawings. "You're Natalia, right?" I asked as naturally as possible. She nodded and mumbled a sound of affirmation. "It's a very nice name. Do you have a favorite team?" I asked, raising my eyebrows and nodding at her outfit. She clenched her pen and started doodling again. I looked over and saw what appeared to be an intricately detailed cloud at the top of her page. "Do you like to draw?" She stopped and closed her notepad. "I read your essay," I said, retrieving my notes from her bag. Let's see. I think I'm actually just about out of time. So I'll pause there. If you'd like to read any more, please feel free to continue on in the journal right over there. And we'll move on to our next reader, actually. Let's see. I believe, if I have this right, our next reader is Ellie Martchenke. On Zoom?
Yes.
Yep, wonderful. Okay. Ellie Martchenke is a MALS student whose interests focus primarily in fiction of the urban fantasy or high fantasy genre with occasional jaunts into science fiction. After MALS, they intend on teaching creative writing at an undergraduate level while working on a book or a few as well. Ellie Martchenke.
Thank you. I'm going to read two poems that were published in this edition, and then a short piece that was published in the last Clamantis edition. So the first one is my poem entitled Breadcrumbs. Who I am today is built on a mountain of the dead. Every morning I wake up and crawl over the carcass of myself from the day before. With the strength in my legs, I push off, watching the lifeless flesh roll down the pile at all the corpses that look just like me. The versions of myself that I killed in pursuit of what exactly? If I look too long, I realize I do not always recognize the face. I have the urge to rifle through all the pockets, to carve parts off or weld them back into being. Is it mourning or satisfaction I feel when I look into all those foggy glass eyes? Do I rue the brutal act of self-violence I perform every day, the mutilation of my very person? Am I merely trimming the rose bush, tenderly clipping back dangerous growth? Or am I carving out parts of myself and discarding them behind me, like a lost little boy and girl trying to find a way back home? And then now I'm going to read the short nonfiction piece that was published in the last journal. I wrote this piece just about a year ago after my dad's health took a turn for the worse. And now I'm just under 2 months of living without him. So, purple flowers always bloom. How do I tell you that you are in every flower I see? Life is lived in relation. You on your knees, covered in dirt, a huge grin on your face as you gingerly uproot yet another bunch of monkey grass, transplanting it for the 4th time this season. You're making room for another flower garden, you intent to plant me purple flowers. I don't even know what specific flowers they are. You planted 3 different kinds, all budding at different times of the year, so no matter when I visit, that corner of the yard will always be my favorite color. I could have asked you, or looked it up on my own, just to know what kind they were, but I like it better not knowing. Not knowing means that every purple flower I see could be the one you planted for me. I imagine I can see you standing over a flight of purple flowers with your hand on your hip as you deliberate on which ones to choose, stroking your chin, an affectation you picked up when I was young because of the way it made me giggle. Every purple petal has your thumbprint on it. So too does the monkey grass, the elephant ears of which you were so fond of, and even Mom's vegetable garden. I would follow you down the length of the house, always right on your heels as you went to and from the gate, tiptoeing through the grass, knowing I should be wearing shoes, but refusing in my childlike desire to appear tough. You would suddenly turn around, causing me to start and squeak and oftentimes run into you. You would laugh and catch me from falling, and your eyes would twinkle, so glad to see me still there, still following, still with you. I still do follow you around the yard on the days you're strong enough to walk it, and you will still suddenly turn around, the mobile half of your face turning up in a soft smile, your eyes still twinkling at the fact that I'm there, still behind you, still with you. The yard was your happy place, and I thought it was so silly the way you would smile and grunt like Tim Allen did on the home improvement reruns that were always playing on our TV, gleefully spreading around manure every year so the St. Augustine would grow strong enough to survive the Texas heat. Every braid of glass that blows in the wind, seems to hold a measure of your care. I don't remember what kind of grass we had before, but I remember the spring you came home, happy as a lark, with a bed full of St. Augustine squares in the truck. I didn't really understand then why we were returfing the backyard. Just wait, you said. Wait and see this summer. It was a game changer. The stickers were gone, and we can now run barefoot through the grass without fear. That was the first summer we bought a slip and slide. It was a neighborhood hit. I will see some shrubbery outside of a business and find myself wondering what kind of sculpture you would be trying to make out of the bushes in the front yard if you had the stamina to hold the trimmer long enough to get the job done. You tried an elephant once, I remember. I think Ethan broke off its trunk during a birthday party and you scrapped the whole elephant thing. Hippos were all the rage now, you said. Later years, you found this green reflective orb that you stuck in there, wedged between the branches. You were inordinately fond of it. I caught you polishing it once or twice. I could tell you were distraught when a storm had shattered it. You reverently picked up the pieces, but never filled in the hole it left. I've watched you build play sets and pits, the vegetable garden for Mom and her jalapenos and her watermelons and shockingly fruitful tomato plants, small brick dividers to house your flower beds under the bedroom windows. You rebuilt the fence along Perkins first, then along the old House of Fish lot behind us. Hell, you rebuilt both decks twice since I've been alive and aware enough to remember. Your second ones are real works of art, truly. I think it was a good choice to just waterproof the wood instead of stain it darker, and the tin roof you built is gorgeous. I still think you should have some hanging lights or something. I know, electricity is a bitch, but I know you will figure it out. Could have figured it out. You have other things on your mind right now. I wish I was there so I could run the electric cables for the lights, so I could take care of the flowers and the St. Augustine for you. But the truth is, my thumbs are blacker than night despite the apparent lack of decay under my nails. I don't like getting dirty, and the smell of manure always made me gag. I don't know what parts of the yard get what levels of sun at what parts of the day. I always hated the fact you watered the lawn every afternoon in August, so I wouldn't want to do that either. You gave me that aloe vera shoot, and I've been too afraid to tell you it died. I don't know what happened. I don't want you to think it was because I wasn't trying, that I didn't care. It's just that I didn't know what to do. I wanted to see your face when you came over and saw it flourishing. I wanted to be able to smile back and engage with you on how I got it to be such a magnificent plant. I hope that's okay, that the aloe vera plant died. I hope that it's enough to know that I tried, that I wanted things to be different, that it's not because I didn't care enough. It's not yet spring. I don't know how you will handle it this year. I don't know how the St. Augustine will do without its yearly manure bath, how the monkey grass will do without being transplanted a dozen times, or whether the topiary will get out of control without your creative gaze. At least the flowers you planted in the corner, the purple ones, at least those are perennials. Maybe that's why you picked them. So that even after you cease to take care of them, they will still flower year after year after year. Just so no matter when I come visit, there will always be purple flowers in bloom. And then for my final piece, it's the second poem I had published in this edition. It's a little bit of a love poem, so we'll leave on a happier note. This one's entitled Cerulean Swells. The string symphony of your face surrounds me. The curve of your lashes swallow me like a wave amidst the vast ocean that exists in your deep blue eyes. Not the dark waters of depths unknown, but the soft pillow that invites you. The sun dances on the sand below the surface, promising a relaxing peace if only I surrender and let myself flow. And therefore, I am ethereal in the moments of silence in the dead of night until you reach for me in your slumber, pulling me close on instinct. Your warmth burning my back with a passion that only manifests when you sleep. The rock of your calm breath vibrates like a sea breeze. Your life is subtly comfortable for my body as I dive deeper. Your heavenly waves support me, cerulean and nebulous. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Kyle Singh. Kyle Singh is a graduate student at Dartmouth College studying general liberal studies. He's a graduate student. He's a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and currently resides in Hanover, New Hampshire. Kyle Singh.
A vision. Those that are walking with their heads down in the service of arrival are simply tragedies from our planet. The rivets in their foreheads from squints to resolve what is ahead. In the search of some kind of through line, they ignore our positions. I'm sure we could locate ourselves when placed beside one another, when placed in an open plot of grass. We'd step forward to nowhere, step in the middle of ellipses. We'd glow and not need to know the escape of a sigh, an expansion of the diaphragm and release. Those that have passed on would still want to know the mystery of the act, while having the knowledge that they'd be okay at the very least. Oh, what they'd do for someone to ask them how they felt right before it happened. And I would grieve for the disconnectedness of my planet, for how we would still run to nowhere in that field. In the gaseous overflow of fog, we'd still keep walking. As beta fish hurl into glass, we'd still keep walking, earnestly to nowhere. One day, possibly in spring, when the gift of fogless morning is chosen to be delivered, I'll witness how some will stop their stride and pull their hands over their eyes. I'm so grateful to be here and be welcomed into this community, and thank you to the library for having us. This poem's called I'm a Child, and it's about a patient with dementia that I used to visit back home in New York. And I don't know, we became friends, and she thought she became inanimate objects. So she thought one day that she was a yew shrub, Y-E-W, a yew shrub. You've all seen those shrubs with the little red fruits that you can't eat. So this is about that. The hallway beyond her room is narrowed to a point. Sill after sill are flower pots in terracotta, which hold plastic tulips and marigolds, a watering can of Play-Doh beside them. She is a downy cheek as a pointillist collection of wrinkles. When you sit next to her and listen, actually listen, she leans in as if a secret fortune had been discovered. An audience is finally present to hear a declaration of how the lutefisk is too cold and how it was de rigueur for the nurses to ask how each morning was treating her. She looks right at you and makes you look at the floor. But then there are times her eyes flicker to a rapid blinking, as if blinking was voluntary, as if she was haunted. She turns away. She can't continue to look right at you. And then a strange fall in the pitch of her voice, and that lanky jawline goes suffused with color, overtaken by a dream to correspond with an absence of facility, an absence of where the room is. She calculates how long it will take for her to know and pass down what she learned as a child. It is painfully beautiful to watch someone become a new thing. She's bereaved of all identifiers. She leans back in her rocking chair and tells me her name is you, tells me to remove each needle from her twigs, tells me to rid her of the poisonous berries she carries. I'd like to ask her how I can carry out these wishes when dirt is what I'd like to keep separate from my shirt. And yet the shrubs do not know that they will last forever, that within them is pulp which could stain an entire lakeside, that their visit for 2 weeks means I am certain to stand still. For 2 weeks I walk to you and look upon your tendrils. I am so distant, you are still waiting. We come to meet each other, but you cannot understand. I live alone with myself, yet together with a spirit, a drifter, immobile, yet set to motion, persuaded by the illusion that you have appeared before me as a spirit, an offering to remain still. Now, I can never profess to understand how we can all be part of the same light. On your supposed last day, when you were about to turn back from fruit to flowers on strigs, I ripped you from your bundles and threw you onto me, popped each husk onto my arms, hurled them in the last attempt to become you. How the juice of black currants became my entire arm, how the speckles of violets washed into my hair. So this next poem is about my aunt, and she's a very interesting woman. I guess that's all I should say. The poem is called Regressions. My adopted auntie, you know, the kind that calls you her son, assails my genetics. And that grin she wears now might be her passing lives, the future that dispenses and dispenses within us, that binds us and binds us and moves us and moves us. She goes for a walk with me on the trails and stares. Once a girl who spent 1 year on the summit of an unnamed mountain, a stubborn girl, jet black hair. I would have wanted to be around her all the time. She, my guide, and I would walk above a stretch of ruts. When she stopped, I stopped. From time to time, she would ask unanswerable questions. How many miracles have you seen in the last 5 days? I'd always answer with another question. You've heard the myth of the tin can, the metal which could speak of the stamp embossed in its frame, could yield each description of how it started as a single scaffolding, how sharp it felt to be bent into a cylinder, sanded down to the sparks, forged. The myth was whether or not the can jumped off the line when it saw thousands like itself, assembled and filled with minestrone soup. I explained to Auntie that my favorite assignment in 2nd grade was when I was asked to describe the process of an object being made, and then her answer. Yes, I did feel rockness, she answered, and I regressed to rock in my last life, now a sage in her 90s. My first idea of how to live in the world came from those who have learned to deal with it, who have made from their lives a series of things. I'll read three short ones. This is called Moving In. It's about moving in. Who will ask us to proclaim that we are dead weight? Who will move from the land of their past 2 generations because that land is occupied by us who are the first generation? There are no remains from Byzantium, just an unidentifiable patch of swimming clouds. I remember peeking out the window to check if someone was looking. There is no malt liquor for the masked gesture to rummage with his paws. I remember trying to understand the pact of neighbors making an offering of sweets to a mistaken answer at the door. So this next poem is called That Which is Everlasting. And it's kind of, that poem that every 20-something-year-old needs to write about, finding meaning, that kind of thing, I guess people outgrow that, but I'm still very much in that rut, so. That which is everlasting. All speech, because it is river and food and gives us declaration, what we believe in, identity, language, turns out to never have happened, except for when we are alone and it is between us, between two interlinked inhabitants, visitors. Look, I have called out my own name. The acknowledgement of wonder does fill our lives. Our lives are not meaningless. You reaffirm this. But don't expect now to be remembered. When I first realized that I had been given a moment, I asked myself if I really needed it. An undistinguished pit latches on to an empty stair. Small moths scuttle off the bark, just as they did in the last millennia. Try to acknowledge the next moment as permanently frozen, an undistinguished declaration, traversing from end to end, experienced just once by primal originators in utter shock when they were left without words. This last poem is for a classmate of mine from high school who unfortunately passed away in his early 20s. I wrote this, I was asked to read a poem. I was very honored to do that. And it's called The Return. The Return. Let me come to you not to remember and not to forget. Let me cross that long field where you said you were born, although you were not. I want to find the spot where I will be let go, not near the coroner, but into clear water. For now, I'm here to leave you, where the fig trees are studded with your breath and their seeds. Each bears a form of you, of whom I have known since before the beginning, although there was never such a time in which we had met before. Each ripening an image of what will come after by the dozens, the thousands. Each fig is your skin. Now the time for the return, your charcoal in the slipstream running. We watch it form nothing new. We cannot find anything that was not there before. All that can be realized forgoes the images we have looked after, and in turn allows us to set out over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Let's see. What is the last reader we have this evening is Erin Bennett, unless anybody else wants to go later on, which, open offer. Erin Bennett is a writer and illustrator currently living in Taftsville, Vermont. Although recently moved. Yes, recently moved to the area. Her work, both written and visual, can be found in journals such as Horse Egg Literary, Fairy Peace Mag, and High Shelf Press, among others. She works as an administrative assistant to the Leslie Center for the Humanities at Dartmouth College. Erin.
Hi, everybody. Of course, I got here and sat down and said, I never sent Matt a bio, so I have no idea what he's going to say, but that was all right. Okay, so I am reading a piece of fiction called A Good Sense of Taste. I am going to read about 6 pages, or what I have is 6 pages of the story, but it's longer than that. So I guess you'll have to read on for the ending if you so choose to do so. Yeah, I suppose the only other thing to know is that this is a story told through emails. Okay. A good sense of taste. Email subject, missing you, heart. Date, Friday, September 9th, 2022. The hour is 20:37. Dearest Elle, so many thoughts. I suppose I'll start with how the weather is. I woke up in this narrow, borrowed bed to a warm, rust-colored morning outside my window, which gave way to a steamy afternoon for walking in the city, a little rain, but all was cool and dry by dinner. I snuck my plate from the dining hall out to the gardens to watch the sky change. The evening twilight here lasts for hour upon lilac hour until I've stayed up well past 12, 1, even 2, with no sense of the time. I'm drinking coffee again, oat milk, no sugar, quitting Diet Coke altogether. The food here is fine, but I already long for my own kitchen and my own roast chicken with lemon and fennel. I left the recipe for you on the fridge. Does the apartment feel like a palace now that you have it all to yourself? I suspect if you call out, there would be an echo. I hope the fish are doing well. Don't forget they need attention and play at least twice a day, and remember they're hungriest at night. Or perhaps that's just me. I'm ravenous. Do you recall that bit of Simone de Beauvoir's journals when she says something about material experience, wanting to lick the earth and everything on it? I share this compulsion to experience every old stone, every doorknob, to run my hands over every vine and tree. Unadvisable sightseeing etiquette, you should know. No one on the walking tour appreciated it. Trying to make friends with the other art students here, but mostly I draw and keep to myself, unsure where to sit at breakfast. Advice welcome. I feel as though everyone can see it, the sparkling void of my missing you, following me around, and it makes them nervous to only offer a seat for one. The street lights just went out over the dusk. The bulbs glow a different color here, deep amber instead of our electric white. I attached a picture of the street below my room. I know what you're thinking. You fly halfway around the world and then you send a picture of a lamppost. Right back soon. Always yours, M. Subject, missing you. Again. Tuesday, September 13th, 2022. Dearest Elle, today was hot, naked, burning, blue day. The grass in the meadow is a dry, prickly golden yellow. My poor shoulders are scorched to the bone. I'm glad you like the street lamps, smiley face. And thank you for the photos of the woods at home. How different our spruces and birches are from the oak and cherry tree. The roots of city trees seem to grow like liquid, filling in the narrowest gap between limestone walls, between the cobblestones in the streets, spilling their flowers over door frames. Trying to paint, draw, brush, no good. My feet always itch to be walking in the city. I'd like someone to talk to, though, gossip with a little in the market or in the store. It's not that the other artists aren't friendly, but you're right. I'll try going to the taverns after class, like you suggested. Haven't tried that yet. Someone's gone home already. I hear she missed her children too much. I feel bad. She was talented. Attempted a still life of a bowl of tiny, tart strawberries I stole from breakfast. I never noticed how destitute an overripe strawberry could be, sitting there, turning to vermilion mush. I had to stop. It was too sad. Wish you could hear your touch. Wish you could send your touch through the post. How I thirst for it. Always yours, M. Subject, still missing you. Saturday, September 17th, 2022. Dearest Elle, a cool breeze squeezes through the bedroom window tonight, thank heavens. Evenings are all stars and window lights. Can't see the moon from behind the rooftops. Received your letter. I have it here next to me. The paper is beautiful. How strange to get a postcard from home. I'll send a proper postcard too. Here, no green hills. I see only the city, cathedral towers, apartment windows thrown open. The kind of city I thought was only erected in picture books. Buildings with red doors, pink walls, white trim on the windowsills, purple doors, golden frames, or green paint on brick, mustard doors, cream shutters, all with crooked panes. Everything so old its foundation has wiggled and shifted with the earth itself. Food is better this week. Growing fond of pies. Savory pie, like half-baked, moon-shaped delicacies called a pasty. Also, an unexpected discovery. Walking back from the pharmacy, I took a narrow alley and saw a tiny old woman step out of the doorway. The kind of woman who is so small she wears a sweater even in the sweltering heat. She smiled at me as I got closer. I thought she needed help. But no, she was just standing in front of her shop welcoming potential customers. Before I could think otherwise, I stepped inside, feeling a little obligated. So small and cramped, I learned she restores vintage and used clothes. Vintage and used clothes. Delphine is her name. From somewhere in France, not from here. Beautiful mounds of clothes. Her place makes you feel like a mouse in the overstuffed luggage of an old silent movie star. I bought a silk top. The only one like it, she said, alone in the world. There's a linen suit that would fit you perfectly. I was looking at it and we started talking about the fine fabric and the seams. I don't usually go for that sort of thing, but she was so quick and funny. Try this on. Where do you need to be? Let them wait. They won't notice you're late when you're wearing this dress, she said to me. I left this little old woman's company feeling real, revived, and oxygenated. Imagine if you came to stay for a few nights. One of these weekends? I know. It's very far and it's very expensive. I told Delphine about you when I was looking at the suit. You would adore her. She very kindly set the suit aside just in case you might want it. Got some thin lines and gray shapes down on paper today, but no paint, no color. I'll have to think of something brilliant quick or else this whole trip will be for naught. Send me dreams of great, beautiful work. Always yours, M. Subject, missing you. Monday, September 19th, 2022. Dear L, another searing sun today. I don't intend to sound so melancholy. Please don't worry. Our phone calls are just the only small, private place I can be a little blue and melancholy if I feel like it. I am so glad to be here. So glad that I could burst into incredulous tears every morning. I saw Delphine again on my walk this morning. She made a plan to meet for coffee and pie. I was nervous our first encounter being so lovely was just a fluke, but talking wasn't awkward at all. At last, someone here with an appetite like mine. She ordered 1 slice of rhubarb and 1 currant. I ordered 1 lemon curd and 1 sour apple. Everything with cream, a balm for the spirit. I attached pictures. The food looks bright as crystal. I think this might be something. A series of portraits, maybe, of Delphine dressed in her fancy clothes, eating beautiful slices of pie with her delicate wrinkled hands and a poof of lavender silver hair. Shall I send you sketches? So long since I've felt the drunken buzz of a real idea. I wish I could package the feeling of eating a mushroom pie in an old garden and send it home to you. I wish so much. But let's not be sad about that now. The heart grows fonder, right? Have the fish jumped out of the water for you yet? Late at night, when it's well and truly dark, is the best time to entice them. It's 2:30 in the morning here, their favorite hour for dancing, if you haven't yet gone to sleep. Back to sketching a bit before bed. Call very soon. Imagining your mouth. Perhaps you think of mine? Always yours, M. Subject. Missing you, new thread. Tuesday, September 27th. Dear L, I'm sorry it took so long to reply. I'm starting to worry for the trees on campus. The willows carry on in desert conditions. I look forward to seeing how you rearrange the furniture this time. How did the fish take it? Remember to keep them out of the sun. Very important. It sounds like you had a wonderful hiking trip. I thought you would be glad to hear for once I was well and truly busy painting. The internet is in and out at Delphine's shop, rather, her home, above the shop. That's where I've been painting this week. The dorm room I sleep in is too stuffy and the workspaces at the college are too full and noisy. She poses so well, I suspect she has been painted before. No, she says, too shy. She can go marble still in a blink. Yesterday, she was in black satin velvet, green embroidered shawl, big artificial blush rose in her cloud of hair. The pie was cherry, blood red. Today, a robin's egg blue tulle dress, red poppy hat, and gloves. Sunshine yellow lemon pie. She invited me to have a little sherry with her at the end of the day. Very fancy, never had sherry before, and why not? She says it is the ritual that has kept her feeling young for so long. The apartment above hers, it turns out, is unoccupied. It is smaller than hers, but bright. I went upstairs to take a look, just quickly, just for fun. What do you think of this place? Delphine asked. I suppose I should be trying to make more friends in class, but it seems I never say the right thing. Hello, how are you? Then I'm well, and you? Then nothing. What else is there? Delphine never asks how I am, only about the painting. And I just ask about the clothes. Today we barely talked at all, and how much nicer it was. Though she does keep asking me to invite the other students to visit. Perhaps they all say no? Perhaps they say yes? Either way, the idea is frightening. Some photos of yesterday's work. Tell me what you think. And maybe I attached one little photo of the apartment above Delphine's. Just a fantasy. Anyway, always yours, M. Subject, missing you, a new thread. Wednesday, September 28th. L. I was just sending the pictures for fun. I'm not trying to lure you here, or, well, maybe. Yes, it is smaller than our current apartment, but if you notice, it is much, much brighter. And black and white tiled floors, just like you said you always wanted. I know you don't want to live anywhere smaller than we have. I just thought it was pretty. 3 clouds today. One was a touch purple. Some hope. Always yours, M. P.S. I am adding sugar to my coffee again. Sometimes. Okay. Every time. And I think all the pie and butter and scones and pasties may have made me a little softer in the middle. Delphine says it's womanlier to have a little belly. He will be very happy, she says. Anyway, I might quite like it myself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin. Now, does anybody want to read anything they may have brought to the event? If not, I think we'll wrap up here. I want to first, again, thank the Howe so much for putting this on. This has just been incredible. I want to thank all of you for coming out on a chilly day like this. Thank all the readers, especially. And please, hang out for a little bit. Enjoy some of the munchkins. We got plenty of cocoa munchkins. Please take a copy of the latest edition back with you. And thank you so much for coming.